Hello friend, it's time for Mandatory Redistribution Party. The Alpha Wolf, the supreme leader of the pack. His absolute dominance and status as biggest boy built on a foundation of thick muscle, glistening fangs, and just being better. He's the best wolf. He's the best wolf. The Alpha's shadow darkens our imaginations. His masculine howl echoes through the discourse of politics, business school seminars, and pick-up artistes, making everyone scared and impressed. The best way to become an alpha? By supporting us on Patreon, but unlike our Patreon, the Alpha Wolf doesn't exist, so that's questionable advice. Nonetheless, we do put a shift in on this podcast, and we're hugely grateful to those of you who support us. Thank you. So through this lens of the Alpha Wolf, which has poisoned many men's minds, this episode's about social status, the beliefs we have about who holds relatively greater or lesser social value. Get stuck in.
And do you think being a comedian makes you more or less alpha?
Alpha? Okay, so like
Alpha
I need
wolf.
to accept the idea of alpha.
Well, you can totally reject it if you want.
No, but I understand what it means, but I'm scared of using the word alpha. Like I want to accept this strange tiering of people. No. It depends, because comedy is like a facet through which people deal with all kinds of different neuroses. So a lot of people are using it, especially like American style comedy. A lot of people are using comedy to become alpha. They're using it to become Chris Rock, and they want to use the fact that I go on stage and I know just what to say, and I'm like got a few jokey, witty lines in my back pocket as a way to dominate in the conversation. But the cultural milieu that me and you exist in is people using their comedy to deal with the fact that they struggle to just exist in their own brain.
Yeah.
And it has given us, like, I don't know about you, but I was like a weird, anxious teenager. And I wasn't like unconfident, but I was confident in my weird, bedraggled group of select friends. And outside of that, I was like a mud skipper left on a kitchen surface.
The notion of alpha is like a super aggressive, dominating figure.
Yeah.
But the person who, if we just reduce it to status, which is what we're really talking about here, someone having status in a group, you could take someone who is like an alpha, I don't know, Robert Downey Jr., who's,
Vegeta.
Right. Put them at an alternative comedy night.
Yeah.
Or put them at a book club.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Then they would see their social
You're saying that
status
alphas
evaporate.
rely on people not leaving the select environments in which they're alphas.
Yeah, I'm saying status is derived, it's situational. Status is situational. And so then being an alpha is situational, and certain behaviours will be rewarded in some circumstances, whereas they could actually be very negative in others.
Yeah, and there's a pattern that you'll see that sort of vindicates that idea within certain areas of comedy, because there's club comedy, and then there's like these weird fringe nights that we seem to subsist in.
Well, and you can go vice versa. So we've probably both seen the phenomenon of club comic at alternative night, alternative comic at club night.
I've seen the latter far more than the former. Because
Yes,
a club
I have
comic, because a club comic has no reason to go and seek out the weird nights that we require.
I have seen club acts try and do like new stuff at alternative nights.
Yeah, I've seen that as well.
And it not be great, or at least be weird, be noticeably weird.
Yeah.
Because they're not bad, and it doesn't mean they're bad. It's just it's changed. The situation's changed.
There's something we understand, because weird comedy is not the norm. So we understand
Yes.
when we've gone into a very clubby environment.
Yeah.
And just for listeners who aren't like aware of the distinction we're talking about, I don't want to start using the terms if they're not. Club environments are the big clubs, and big clubs are very weekendy, and they definitely rely quite a lot on their wet sales as well, which is the sales of alcohol. So they're known for being a little bit more raucous, is the stereotype of that. But then within that are nights like the Gong shows, which lean into that quite a lot. They actively encourage a certain criticism of the act. So it
Hostility.
hostility, especially like the London King Gong show is like famously one of the most hostile shows a new act could possibly do.
And I mean, that's the gig I started at King Gong in Manchester. And then that's the thing of circumstances. The circumstances dictate, reflect back into the kind of comedy you do, right?
But I'm saying that we're more keenly aware of the distinction because we went towards what we only knew as the only depiction of what comedy was, which was these big clubs. And then we went to the alternative scene, like the fringe scene, and then we learned the difference between them. But when you're a club comedian and everything's working for you within that environment, which is the main environment, you go, well, this is comedy, I'm good at comedy.
Yeah.
And you can go into an environment which isn't that and be like, well, I'm a good comedian and this should work. So while they're not like necessarily worse at comedy, they lack a certain instinct that we have had to gain for our own survival of being like, what does this specific space require and what element of my act should I shave off because it will not be welcome here?
Which is a skill in and of itself. Yeah. But there's definitely the overall point we want to take away is status is determined by context and isn't innate.
There's a Chinese proverb
Go on.
that I have heard and I've struggled with it all my life. I'm genuinely, this is a Chinese proverb I heard when I was a teenager and it's of a great archer who's coming to a village, right? And everyone's showing this archer respect.
Archery 100.
Yeah, this guy's like one of the masters of archery.
Yeah.
And he can like shoot an eagle out of the sky from miles away. And people are like, that's superhuman. Like, we're intimidated by you.
Sick.
And then one person doesn't bow. And this like archer, master warrior goes, hang on, you're not showing me like the due respect that I've earned through my years of warfare.
Yeah.
And this guy goes, no, hang on, actually. And he takes out a coin. And the old Chinese coins had small holes in them.
Put them on a string,
And he pours oil so that it goes through the hole in that coin without touching the sides. Doesn't touch the coin at all. And then the archer goes, I was wrong. And he bows to the guy. And the message of the story is, if you're good at something, that is worth respect no matter how like it's viewed within culture. But from when I was like 13 to now, I'm like, no, but pouring oil through a coin is useless. That's not helpful.
Well, no, shooting an eagle from far away is not necessarily useful either.
No, but it's to demonstrate that if there was a war, he could do some
It
impressive
has-
stuff.
This guy could be in charge of a castle where the invaders coming through, and in the portcullis, it's all clogged. They're all coming in, it's all clogged, except a tiny little hole. And they go, what are we going to do? There's only this tiny little hole. Have we got a funnel? No, we haven't got a funnel. We haven't got a funnel.
And it can't touch the sides.
What about, get Tony? If it touches the sides, it will set this on fire because the oil's so hot. Can we cool it down? No.
Yeah, the sides are on fire, so if it touches the sides, it will take the fire down. And
Kill it,
bad.
burn us.
Yeah.
Get Tony. And he does it.
Yeah, no problem, lads.
Yeah. It's got
I mean, you have to like sort of MacGyver some incredibly specific situation for that to be useful.
yeah, I get, yeah.
So I'm saying there's limits. Yes, your level to which you are an alpha is based on context, but there are some people who must have to like exist in very weird or bad context in order to get their shot of being an alpha.
That's the thing, isn't it? If certain skills are rewarded by the social structures that are in place that have developed through hundreds of years or whatever. Take like capitalism or the patriarchy or whatever. So like, you know, the stuff of a lot of successful CEOs, there's a higher proportion of them are like psychopaths or whatever.
Yeah.
It's because
we reward those things.
Because we reward psychopathic behavior. It's not because being a psychopath is necessarily good. It's just because the system exists that rewards those behaviors. You know, and then you've got a whole like self-help community of it just assumes the system is static.
Yeah.
And how do you improve yourself?
How do I become a psychopath? Please help.
Yeah. It's that thing of like the self-help industry needs people to never fix themselves because how would they sell more self-help books? And then education, which is geared towards more and more making people like effective and profitable workers.
Yeah.
You know, all that kind of employability shit. But I'm more thinking about the social dynamics of stuff on like a micro level, like interpersonally. Do you think being an alpha is A, even a thing, or B, desirable?
Is it a thing?
Do you think it's a thing? Do you think like socially, like
Well, it's because it's
people
so-
try to be alphas, or, you know, are people doing that? Is
Yes,
that a thing?
people try to be alphas.
Do they succeed?
Well, because it's like a social construction, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they wouldn't say so. They'd be like, no, we're wolves.
Yeah.
So we must organise like wolves do.
Yeah.
But we're not wolves. Massive truth bomb for you. We're not wolves.
Could be werewolves.
But if people want to indoctrinate themselves in this idea of having a wolf pack mentality that needs to have these tiered hierarchy, and you've got enough friends who believe it, then yeah, you can be an alpha. Being an alpha is just like being recognised as being an alpha, so it can exist.
Well, yeah, because if people that surround you believe it.
Yeah.
But is it real to the extent that people outside your framework could get caught up in it? I mean, first of all, like just a little bit of the like science stuff. The guy who originally came up with the term like alpha wolf, do you know about this?
No.
So L. David Meach came up, he wrote a book about wolves. Did some study in national parks about wolves, and he was like, yeah, wolves, there's this alpha wolf. And then he did more research. He was like, oh, I've got this alpha wolf, and it was like a best-selling book. Did more research and was like, oh, I'm very badly wrong. I'm wrong. And then he tried to remove his successful book about alpha wolves from circulation, but it was just out there. It
Yeah,
was gone.
once it's out,
He's
it's
got no
out.
control over it. And then like loads of people believe in it. And then he's trying to do talks like, no, this is wrong. I'm the guy who came up with it. This alpha wolf thing is wrong. There's not alpha wolf. It's bullshit. Like you say, even if alpha wolves were a thing, applying it to humans doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But then people would go like, oh yeah, but chimps have like an alpha, but they're like closer to us than wolves, which is because like bonobos are closer to us than wolves, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they have like matriarchal societies. But
And we also
that's-
don't need to do all the weird sex stuff that bonobos do all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I think bonobos like fuck as almost like a form of grammar. Like it's like it doesn't mean the same thing for them to have sex. They just do it as like a weird transactional killing time kind of thing.
Yeah. I like the idea of it as a form of grammar, though. Like a sentence, a bonobo, when you communicate with another bonobo, it can be a question or not, depending upon whether it ends with sex.
Yeah. Yeah. It's an inclusive or exclusive or depending on whether or not I come.
The person who did the studies on chimps,
Yeah.
Franz de Waal, or Waal, I don't really know how to pronounce their name, W-A-A-L, is how you could Google it if you want to research, which is what you really need as a listener. There are alpha chimps, so there's chimps who have status over other chimps, but they can get that status by like being kind, grooming other chimps, or distributing food.
Yeah. Providing things that other people might appreciate.
Yeah, so they may be physically weaker and less aggressive than another chimp. And they also make little coalitions between each other. So say there's one like big aggressive chimp, two weaker chimps might be like, well, that guy's a dick, and then maneuver themselves into a high status position over one big guy. So there's no alpha wolves, but there are alpha chimps. But the way to become alpha is kindness, perhaps.
Or Machiavellianism.
Or Machiavellianism.
Which maps onto human behaviour a little bit better.
Yeah, a little
than,
bit better.
Being a jock.
Like Machiavellianism isn't compassionate, but it doesn't map onto the way alpha malehood is depicted. Machiavellian sneakiness would be like beta behavior, right? Rather than, in the language of the manosphere, the language of these people.
But like you said, manosphere, like alpha, we're not hearing this alpha talk from like teenage girls.
No.
When I think of alpha talk, I'm thinking of like
It's red pill.
The new Western masculinity.
Guys who hate women, but are also obsessed with how to get women and please women.
So I've got a friend who works in food hospitality. They talk about how the chefs are like always really toxically masculine.
Gordon Ramsay like.
Yeah, and I've like when I was a teenager, I worked in a kitchen. It was like there was this strange like bravado of the chefs, and especially when they're like younger. And they said to me like, that's because cooking is coded female, right? It's a nurturing thing to give someone else food,
Right.
and so of course they're like, I'm not going to be triple man so that I can undo all the woman energy of serving you a delicious baked loaf of bread.
So patriarchy's coded cooking as feminine, and then as an effect of patriarchy doing that, they then have to behave in that stupid
Yeah, they
way.
still want to be chefs because chefs, it's like a high skill job, and you can like, there's a career ladder within working in catering. but you've got to be like, oh, I'm the biggest man here.
Just throwing plates at everyone.
Yeah, right. So I think the masculinity is an invention because previously only women were defined as the other, right? This goes back to like Simone de Beauvoir and stuff. Women are the other.
Yeah.
And so men don't need to have special attributes. A man can be anything.
Yeah.
And a woman has this limited thing. And then now feminism has had a lot of successes. Women can now be a lot of things. There's still loads of pushback and reaction against that, but like feminism has been a successful social movement in that it has achieved things.
Yeah, some things, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying that feminism is done or anything.
Yeah,
I'm just saying that it hasn't been a completely inert, ineffective movement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's what some of the red pill bullshit is a reaction to, right?
But that's it.
Women have slightly more autonomy, so men are reacting in a way of like, how do I regain as much power as I have?
And so
before?
part of that reaction is because they believe that all these gendered creations of the patriarchy are like these truisms. We are different. We're like different species.
Yeah.
And so they look at femininity as making gains. Then they turn back and they go, okay, so what's masculinity?
Yeah.
But then if femininity is like, you know, in a lot of ways, everything that's coded feminine is everything like nice.
Yeah.
Gentleness,
Yeah,
kindness, listening, making someone a lovely soup when they're ill.
Yeah.
Like almost all aspects of compassion are coded female.
Yeah.
So if you're turning to masculinity and you go, we need to shore up this end of the fence, you've basically turned every aggressive or brutish behavior into being like, that's my identity and that's the club that I'm going to try and fight for. Like, I suppose there are like some aspects of masculinity that maybe are positive. Like, none of it seems wholly positive in the same way that making someone a cup of tea is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all this alpha stuff comes back into people trying to represent just all the leftovers you can have as a human being when compassion's off the table.
I was thinking about, you know, the alpha thing and where it came from, because I've seen people talk, I've had conversations with other comedians about this, about like status in your act and the necessity of status and how hard it is to do stuff that's more like low status with the audience in and that is a real thing. Like, I think certain audiences, if you don't establish a right to be there, they like smell fear and then you're fucked. And you can't, it's almost easier to go high status to low status something later in the set than vice versa. Like once you've lost status with an audience, if they think you're struggling, then they could turn on you. And a lot of it comes from intent. You could be doing something like behaving as a low status character on stage. But if you've already got a TV show or something, they'll be like, this person's doing this intentionally. I understand this. I'm in. But if it's just someone who's like brand new, they'll be like, this person's obviously making mistakes and it's bad. And then respond to the same material and delivery in a radically different way.
Yeah.
Depending on like what status is. So kind of, I think comedians think a lot about status. And you've done, you know, the bit you used to do a while back where you just like stop audiences from laughing. That's a really high status thing to do, right?
Yeah. Well, though, like, status is a complicated thing and you can like make all these strange exceptions to it. Because the bit I was trying to do. Yeah. So like there was a bit that I did like a few years ago. I think you'll find a recording of it online somewhere.
Searching internets for Sean Morley stand-up content. BBC mainframe identified. Hacking. Access granted.
Wow, it's me, it's Sean Morley, top lad, big friends, always tries his best, ready to bring out some of the biggest jokes, absolutely smash the roof off, really bang it out tonight. Then... Guys, I haven't actually done anything yet, so laughing at this point's actually quite disrespectful, I'd say. Guys, I don't know why there's an insurgency here on the front row. All I've done, to my mind, is come out and say I'm going to be competent, and you've taken one look at me. Guys, don't start joining in with the front row. Guys, I've had a lot of trouble here with the front row. I'm very glad that the sides here, who can only see me in profile, have decided not to enjoy it. And I can only thank you for that, given that I've got a core audience here at the front that just seem flippant, dismissive, and do you see what I mean? Like they're so vying for attention. I nearly need to mention them. The last adjective there was going to be turgid, and they couldn't. All right. The far right is a lost cause. And take that phrase in as many ways as you want. I'm only going to be pointing to the left brethren, and if that has to be some kind of in a bubble where we only really hear our own thoughts on social media, then so be it. I'm only really going to be performing to the far left tonight, if that's okay. Okay, the far left is way too self-congratulatory. Looks like I'm a moderate once again. And just for those listening at home, I'm very sorry, that whole opening segment was very spatial, and it requires you understanding the semicircle of the room that we're in tonight. I apologise if you don't, if that didn't really make any sense to you. I'm not used to performing on radio, and therefore to people who, by the trapping of the medium, are both in the future and blind. Too hard a demographic to really appeal to, I apologise. Guys, just before I move on to the meat of my material, which I've been kept from doing from a small Guys, you've gone rabid, you've gone feral, so... Okay, I can have you removed. Okay, I'm just going to talk over then. Just before I move on, just as a mark of respect, before I get into the meat and bones of my material, it'd be really good, just as a mark of deference, if all of us together to just quickly stand for the national anthem. So I just feel like the humour just found in this room has been taken out of my hands, and it's... I mean, is there another gig that you guys are listening to? I've just come out and I've made a pretty straightforward request to just show a little bit of respect, and you guys are just crying. You're just crying to yourselves, and your sweat is merging with your tears, and you look squalid. Guys, I'm just going to repeat that again. Maybe the intonation came out wrong and people mistook it as some kind of joke. Hi, I'm Sean Morley, top lad, big friend, always tries his best. And I don't know what I'm doing here. No, why? No. Only clap if it's on the basis of something I've done, not some kind of emergent thing you've hallucinated between yourselves. No, because the problem here is I just came out and I asked for something really nice and polite, and it's been coloured by these guys, and then it can't stretch further back because people are going, oh, there's people laughing at it now, it must be some kind of ironic thing about nationalism. But that's not actually come from me, it's come from 40 strangers that have sat at the front that have coloured my entire act with a lace of irony that I can't seem to remove. And that seems to be like an unfair context in which I should ever be expected to flourish. Well, guys, I've come to the end of my set now, and thanks for having me. I've been Sean Morley.
And the whole premise was like, I'm just trying to introduce myself and like set up what I want to do, but I'm saying it in this really frantic, over the top way. And when people laugh, I'm like, oh, I'm not doing a joke at this bit. I'm just trying to introduce myself. Like, this is who I actually am, so don't laugh at this bit. And then when people laugh at that, which is the intention, I'm like, oh, hang on, please, because I'm just asking to show a bit of respect. Okay, I'm a comedian, I'm here to make you laugh, and we all understand why we're here, but please try and respect me. And if I'm lucky, that will start to catch, and I just end up battling against that, and I'm like, please let me start my set. If you keep interrupting
But it's amazing because the words you're saying are like low state, please respect me. You're undermining me. You're like begging an audience for something. Yeah. But actually the audience understand, and what's happening is that you're in complete control. Yeah. And being very funny. I think that is an interesting tool of the comedian, of like playing with status. But mainstream clubby stuff, particularly like the mainstream American stuff that's on Netflix or whatever, is so like high status. I think the onus is on women more. There's the expectations for all acts on a club night to behave in a certain way, but the expectation for women
is to do it like even heightened.
Is to do it. You need to
give me respect on parity with a man, and to do that, it's like if you were ever to hope that getting more women into mainstream comedy would help soften the masculinity of it. Well, in some corners, I don't think that's the case, because women, in order to just be allowed into those spaces, they need to perform the same masculinity 110% just to be considered valued.
It's exactly the same as the business thing of or politics.
Now that women are in this space, we're going to ensure they have to be ruthless in order to stay here.
Yeah, perform the male aspects, the coded male aspects of this role in an even more exaggerated way to assure the audience who's bought into those ideas that that's the case.
And also as well, like, not to be like acting like it's a personal failing of any of these comedians that they're not like coming out and whispering. Like, comedy's really uniquely nerve-wracking, and if you like give yourself the bravado when you perform, it helps you a lot to get into like this idea that you're playing a character, and it helps you not get just absolutely attacked by the idea of I'm up there and there's 100 people down there and what the hell's going on. And I'd say like the staging of comedy, which again is like something I do in my new show, there is coded status inequality just into the practicalities of staging. Yeah. We put our comic on a stage in a light show that's like not just there for practicality. You're there to be like, listen to this one. They've been allowed up here. Look how important this
you
person
are sat
looks.
in darkness. They are illuminated. You do not have a mic. They have a mic.
If you speak, they will go in at you.
Yeah. But then that's the thing, isn't like think of the popularity of comedian destroys heckler as like a YouTube or Facebook video.
Yeah. You want to see him. You want to see the piranhas swarming.
Yeah, because that's why a lot of people are afraid to go to comedy nights or aren't enthusiastic about going to comedy nights, because they see that kind of content and they think, oh, that's what it's going to be. And a lot of people, if you aren't comedians who talk to you, will be like, oh, how do you deal with hecklers? And it's like, well, actually, it's very rare.
Very rarely happens. And actually, having a heckler is one of the easier things to possibly deal with as a comedian.
You're sober in there, not more often than not.
Yeah, right. And
Let's
just like
anything else,
the audience doesn't want a drunk shouting out person to win this altercation. So you just need to be like mildly dismissive and then get back to what's going on. And everyone's you've got their sympathy. Do you know what's worse is just the energy of a routine just slowly tapering out. That's unsavable.
Yeah.
That's like an absolute sinking
no one
ship.
asks you about that.
Yeah. How do you deal with it when like you say something that doesn't quite land and it slowly erodes the trust over the next 20 minutes of the show?
Yeah. How do you deal with it when a joke that's worked the last 30 gigs just suddenly doesn't?
Yeah.
And then you lose confidence in everything that's coming after.
How do you deal with it when you're like 40 minutes into a show and you forgot to set something up in the first 15 minutes, and the next joke that everything you've been saying relies on is based on a piece of information you've not given them, but you can't assemble a new punchline to this joke?
Oh, please keep that in mind as people start doing previews over the next few months.
Yeah.
That's like talking about the status thing specifically to comedy. And in that circumstance. But a lot of this red pill anti-feminist thought either comes from or simply overlaps with the pickup artist community. I love the idea that it's an art.
We've got a friend who did some filming in a location where previous to it, there was pickup artist stuff going on in it, and they were waiting for them to do their get out so they can come in and set up for filming a comedy show. And he just went in and went, well, you know, why wait out in the curb? Let's see what this is.
Yeah.
And he said they organised themselves remarkably similar to how a comedy night works.
Right.
They've got multiple pickup artists on a night, and like where you are in the pecking order will determine where you are in the order, and also will determine your fee. They've got a circuit.
And they just do talks.
It's like a mixture of TED Talks, but they're all just about pickup artistry.
But it's more culty, because all we're offering is laughs. And maybe hopefully something else as well. Yeah.
That extra X factor.
Yeah.
Data.
So pickup artists are explicitly saying like, we can get you sex. We have magical skills. This one weird trick to get or sex or whatever. It's like a cult.
Would comedy be like a cult if it promised you a tangible result after the fact? What would comedy need to become a cult that pickup artistry has? Just saying it'll make you taller.
Cults always descend into either weird ritual sacrifice or weird sex stuff. But with pickup artists, the weird sex stuff is in the it's like in the marketing.
It's the promise.
Yeah, it's not like,
we promise you normal
sex
sex
stuff. It has turned out that the leader of this cult is involved in weird sex behaviours.
Well, that's what we want from him.
Yeah, that's what we want from him. That's what's in the marketing. We're paying £1,000 to get that.
Get close, yeah.
Yeah.
Our friend said that the people who attend these, all men obviously, but they're all like built. They all have clearly been to the gym.
Jacked.
Yeah, they're jacked but nervous.
Right. Oh, that's
Well, of course they are.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
their whole thing is they got jacked because they're nervous.
yeah.
They didn't deal with the strange and certain way they behave and talk. They just got biceps. Because everyone in there, by going there, if we assume that everyone there buys into the status of betas and alphas, everyone's gone to hang out with all the other betas. And there's just this one alpha that like swans in and out.
And the betas wish to learn how to become an alpha. But I think they conceive of themselves as, it's weird because it's, there's loads of YouTube videos about like 7 habits of a billionaire.
Yeah.
Of like, oh, I'm going to learn behaviors that will make me succeed. But they envision themselves as future billionaires that are not yet billionaires.
Yeah.
Temporarily embarrassed billionaires.
Yeah.
So they're temporarily embarrassed alpha male sex gods. So they're like, well, I don't know how to do that yet. But once I learn the tricks from this guy,
Yeah.
we're all
got the
alphas
body
in here.
for it, look.
Yeah. We're all alphas in here. Alphas learning from other alphas.
We're all alphas in here, right?
Yeah.
How do you
and-
do, fellow alphas?
Well, that's how I imagine how they talk. Well, I don't just think they say, how do you do, fellow alphas?
Yeah, I'm imagining Steve Buscemi with the T-shirt and the AC/DC.
But surely they're not like trying to get status over each other. Because if they do think, oh, I've got to have alpha status, there can't be multiple alphas. But they must believe themselves to be potential alphas.
I don't necessarily agree.
Right.
If this mindset can like exist long enough and like fall upon enough people,
Yeah.
I think you'll have biological determinist red pillars who are like, no, I'm a beta. It's not great, but hey, what are you gonna do? Fuck. Well, red pill exists on a spectrum to black pill, and in the middle is incel, right?
Yeah.
And so the incel is the people like, I guess I'm like a gamma or a delta or whatever.
So they've bought
That's a
into the
shame.
ideology but failed at it.
Yeah, that's not
Yeah.
like incels are people who believe that there is a hierarchy, there is biological determinism. They have been given the bad end of the genetic stick and they cannot ever break out of that.
But the premise of pickup artistry,
Is that there are 5 tricks that
There's
women
cheat
don't
codes.
want you to know.
yeah, they think they've got speech 100 and they're going to teach you how to do it. You just need to say these things. One of the ones I'm particularly fascinated by is this guy who calls himself Tyler, named after Tyler Durden from Fight Club.
Oh yeah, here's who you want to be.
Yeah. So he's like an interesting.
I mean, we
little
see him
guy.
have sex once with a very maladjusted woman in an abandoned house. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he's like the leader of a quasi-fascist organization.
Yeah, which doesn't seem to get him any additional like sexual interest.
This guy is like a minor player in the book, the Neil Strauss book, The Game, which is like the first big pickup artist Bible. Where that's the thing which has all like negging in it and all that shit. So that guy went on to set up his own company called Real Social Dynamics. The seed bed of it is pickup, but then it grows to basically be a kind of holistic, how to be a strong, successful alpha dude. And it moves away from like negging and little tricks to like talking about. They've got shitloads of videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And
I've seen a lot of pickup artist videos.
oh yeah, and watching them fucks your algorithm, but they are interesting. So there's some very dodgy stuff where there's like hidden camera footage of them like doing like street harassment or whatever as like an educational tool. So they'll be like, I'll show you how to get women.
Well, all of these things come down to just invading people's personal space and hoping to erode people's ability just to say, fuck off.
Yeah.
If there is any trick,
coercion.
it is that one. It is just crunch the numbers, brute force crunch the numbers until one person is like, do you know what? Fine.
Yeah. Well, and also a lot of the guys that are like the gurus of it, so presumably like this Tyler guy.
Yeah.
Like some of his videos look like he does that thing where you like rent like a millionaire's house and pretend it's your house and like walk around in it talking about how you can become alpha.
Yeah.
But it's never clear. It's like they sort of acting like it's their house, but I think they're just in a massive house above LA.
Green screen.
But they're like subsisting on these guys who are paying to get the thing. You know, they're going to pay £1,000. They're going to go to some event where 6 pickup artists will do a set and hype them up, make them feel like they can do stuff. But then they just kind of stay at the back nervously and they've lost their money. Really, all these guys are doing is just playing the numbers game of like street harassing as many people as possible. But because it's the only thing they do,
Yeah.
they get up, go to the gym, and then they go approach women
Yeah.
from like 11 a.m. to 11
But also
PM.
that they have a mind, it's like an ideology.
Yeah, it is. This is what I'm saying. So it's the seed, you get pickup artistry of red pill, and then almost all this other stuff like hardcore free market libertarianism,
They're all around the corner,
anti-feminism,
aren't they? Yeah.
are all like, once you accept that premise, everything else
Yeah.
just is a domino off it.
Because they're really, really compatible with this idea
Yeah.
that we are all determined to be selfish. Women's selfishness is that they just want good seed.
Yes.
And our selfishness is that we want to be that seed, but we'll trick their brain into allowing our beta seed. So just as a footnote to this, the game ends up like snowboarding.
Snowballing.
Yeah.
Snowboarding. SSX tricky.
But there's something not a million miles away that came out in the 90s called The Rules. So The Rules was a book for women based on the idea that like men are useless and they don't listen, but we still want to marry one and have a child with one. Like it was very like upper class New York women is who we're talking about here.
Okay, yeah.
And so this is the way to move that relationship faster, make them to make a commitment to you and settle down with you as soon as possible. And a lot of it is, it's like, play hard to get and stuff like that. Are rules about like when you ring and when you don't ring, or how far you should go on certain dates. Like we've all heard those as like this like integral concept that exists in American culture.
Yeah.
A lot of these sprung up from this one book
Oh,
of
right.
here's how you behave to show that you're like a modest, demure girl that they might want, but you're going to move them as fast as possible for a commitment. A lot of it's about like withholding intimacy and sex for certain amounts of time.
Oh, Jesus.
And it's all incredibly
that's
manipulative.
really, yeah, but it's really toxic because it's like, it comes from that premise of like, women don't enjoy sex and only use it as a currency to
Sure,
manipulate
absolutely.
men.
And it weaponizes all of that.
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get,
that's
get what
fucked.
their ultimate goal is, which is marriage and offspring.
God, that's fucked.
Right.
It's hardcore patriarchy masquerading
And I
as
never
feminism.
see as many people talk about the rules. I mean, because the rules just was sort of a blip and it never went anywhere. But as an
It didn't
artifact,
turn into an online fascist movement
well,
that probably
I
got Trump
think it
elected.
still exists. Like it was incredibly compatible with like, you know, the religious underpinnings that, you know, connects a lot of Europe with its like weird behavior with sex and intimacy.
Yeah.
Like it was compatible with that, but I think it sort of fermented that into these guidelines that are still there. People are aware of them. I think people follow them to some degree.
Yeah.
And they're both based on this very specific biological determinism, which isn't saying men and women are the same thing. They broadly want the same thing. So why can't they communicate that with each other? It is always a set of games that you play to like go behind and do the cheat codes. And like, it's like Game Shark for sex.
Game Shark. Oh, God.
And the thing is that the patriarchy exists as an abstract thing we used to talk about, like a very long form history of male
Yes.
oppression.
Yeah.
But every time a new movement comes within that and people start following it, it sort of reifies and cement these things like they're the truth. Because if I say you're a man and therefore you should behave like this, and then you start behaving like that, as does every other man, it seems to then cement the idea that, oh, well, men just have to behave like this and women behave like that. It's very hard to get beyond that and just be like, hey, do you want broadly a happy life?
There's a piece in The Atlantic in 2014 written by Emily Esfahani Smith, and it's basically about the science of relationships
Okay.
and political studies. And it basically says the traits to have that determine a long-lasting and successful relationship are kindness and generosity.
Yeah, right. I mean, do you know what? I'd like to live in a world where that wasn't like, oh my God, what a mindfuck.
Yeah, I've got to write an article.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I need to write an article. People need to know this. Do you know there's meant to be like these 6 questions you can ask someone and it can trick the brain to falling in love?
Which is the best Resident Evil?
Yeah. Pokemon Red or Blue. And you're meant to sit down with someone and look them straight in the eye, take it seriously, and just ask 6 reasonably personal questions.
Yeah.
It is said that that can, in a statistically higher than normal incidence, result in people starting relationships with each other.
Should we do it?
No. You're like, that's like a precursor to be like, do you want to go out?
Shall we do it now? That's good content.
I don't want to fall in love.
What, are you worried it's going to work?
Yes. It would be really inconvenient for us to fall in love.
Oh, no. Unfortunately, it's 36 questions,
Okay.
which isn't enough for zippy content.
Oh, so even if it was 6, I don't want to do it. You can't do it to me if I don't want to fall in love.
You are concerned that these 6 questions are so powerful that you and I shall fall irreversibly in love if I ask them to you.
Okay, so let's say you're asking a different question, which is, I'm going to roll a D100, and if it lands on 32, we fall in love. I would say, don't roll that. I don't want to play that game.
Okay, I'm going to...
Because also, you'd be like, oh, how did you two meet? I asked him not to roll a dice, but he did anyway. Well, that's how it started. Yeah, it's hard to explain. Like, you wouldn't, would you really test that? Would you genuinely test that?
For content, I'd do anything.
For content? That's sick. That's worse than the beta alpha male
No,
thing.
I wouldn't really do it for content, but I was thinking as a listener, you're hearing that, you'd be like...
Yeah,
do
it's
it.
very hard
You'd
for the
be doing
listener
it.
to be listening even now and be like, surely they will do that. They wouldn't talk about it for this long and not do it.
Yeah, exactly. Unless we cut this out, the listener is going to be like, eventually Sean's going to
It's
care.
actually 36
Just pick the
questions.
top ones. Right. Question 1.
Okay.
Pokemon Red or Blue?
Red.
It says answering all questions should take an hour.
Answering all questions should take an hour. Yeah, no, look, after 36 hours of talking, you're basically married.
Not 36 hours, an hour. Not each individual question.
Answering all... I thought, what, you give an
Sorry,
hour-long
yeah.
essay in response to every single
What
question.
the fuck is this?
Yeah, by the
right,
end of
straight
it,
out
yeah.
of the gate. If you could invite anyone in the world to dinner, who would it be? This is
Just my friends.
yeah, my fucking friends, exactly. This is although we do have the same answer.
I was gonna say, well, yeah, what are you doing later?
Mandatory Redistribution Party was created and produced by Sean Morley and Jack Evans. Our title theme was created by Ella Jean. Sean Morley's performance is from the BBC Comedy Awards 2016. If you enjoy Mandatory Redistribution Party, please subscribe, share and follow us on Twitter at Mando Party. Thank you for listening, and may your day be abundant with kindness and free of wolves. See, you might think you like wolves, but find a gamma wolf in your bins, you'll be phoning the police. You got yourself a problem.